We're going to get started. I know we're scheduled 12:30 to 2. We're just not sure how that happened. This session is supposed to be 12:30 to 1:30, but that just means we have plenty of time for questions at the end if you have them, or you get back 30 minutes in your day, which is always wonderful. So today's session is all about discussions, and we're going to do things the way we've been doing things. If you've been joining the sessions with us over the last couple of weeks, John is going to man the chat and try to answer as many questions as he can there. Those questions that he needs to throw to me to demo, we'll do that like normal. And at the end, we'll open it up for time to ask your individual questions that we might not have had a chance to cover during the session. We are recording now, so it is going to be a full recording when we send it out to everybody today. And we're going to go ahead and get started. I am going to share my screen. Open up the right window and then share my screen. And everybody let me know if you can see my Canvas window.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And we're going to talk about discussions today. I'm going to stop my video. It's always distracting to see my head moving in that top corner. Okay, so today the goal really is to talk about the different options for creating, moderating, and assessing discussions in Canvas. And so what I want to say is that online discussions really give students a platform for interaction, especially in an online course. It also gives them the opportunity for reflection because they have time to think about and compose that response to whatever the question is you're asking, or the reading that they've reviewed, or maybe it's the case that you've asked them to work on. And there are really so many different applications for discussions. It can be a regular graded discussion where they're providing a case analysis. Maybe they've worked in groups, maybe they've worked independently, and they're sharing their findings in the group area for feedback from each other as well as feedback from you. It could be maybe a debate. Maybe you've got groups of students who are going to present perspectives on a particular issue, and then everybody kind of has this whole consensus building that you do in the discussion board. Maybe it's a reading. You give them an article. They're reading a chapter in the book. There are some questions that you pose to them that you'd like them to ask based on those readings. And you can also just use a discussion board for course Q&A. It's not grading their participation. It's just answering questions they might have about the course. And what you'll find is if you encourage students to ask those questions in the discussion board, you might be answering them less, because when the question is posted in the discussion board, the whole class can see it. And when you respond to it, the whole class is privy to your answer. So you'll find that you're answering less of those same questions over and over and over if you set up a course Q&A type board in Canvas for that purpose. So we're going to start by going into a course. And I'm going to pick my course here. And as the instructor, we're going to go to settings first, because before we dive into the discussion tool itself, I want to show you a place where some course level settings for discussions are hidden. You might not know they were there, and I just want to point out that that's where you can find them. So I'm going to click settings in that course menu on the left. And then you want to make sure you click that very first tab, which is course details. And I'm going to scroll down. I'm looking for the words more options, and you'll find that at the very bottom of the list of things on this course details tab. And then there are 3 settings that are related to discussions that you can enable or disable at the course level. And if you're having a hard time seeing it, I can try to zoom in a little bit more. And so the very first one is whether or not you want students to be able to attach files to a discussion. So if you're interested in having them to share things that they found, maybe you're using it for them to contribute links or citations to maybe like a research bank type discussion, you might want them to be able to share files in that particular discussion. So if you do, you want to make sure you have that checkbox on. In most cases, the instructor is going to be creating the discussion topic and you are in control of that, and you only want students to be able to respond to a topic that you've created. But you also have the ability to let students create discussion topics. Maybe you're going to let them drive for a particular unit in time. Maybe there was a topic that their group is responsible for presenting or teaching to the class as a whole, and you want them to be able to create their own discussion topics. Then you want to select that second checkbox. And then this third option is about whether students are able to edit or delete their own discussion posts. If you are grading their participation, you probably do not want to turn this on because you don't want them to be able to remove things that you've already graded or change things that you've already graded. But if you're going to use the discussions more for course Q&A in your course, then it doesn't hurt to allow students to edit or delete their own discussion posts. So you really want to turn this on if you're okay with them being able to remove posts after you've seen them. But if you're grading, it's really one that we don't recommend you turn on. Okay. Once you've made any changes to those 3 discussion course level options, you want to make sure you update the course details at the bottom right. And then we can actually dive into the discussions themselves. So in terms of accessing discussions as the instructor, and I'm just going to zoom out a little, you want to make sure you look for the discussions link in your course menu. And when you click discussions, it'll open up the discussion index page. And the discussion index page is really organized into a couple of different areas. So you'll see 3 areas. The first area at the top is called Pin Discussions. Then you have an area in the middle, which is just discussions. And then down at the bottom, you have the closed discussions. At the very top of your discussions page, you'll find your ability to filter your discussions here at the top. So at the very top drop down, if I click that arrow, I can either choose to view all or just unread. So you can set that using that top drop down at the top. You also have a search field. So if you very quickly want to search through discussions, depending on how active your course is and how many messages there might be to filter through, if you're looking just for a particular student's contribution, you can type that student's name in this search field and it will filter out all of those other messages and show you just the messages by that particular user. To the right of the search field, you have the button that you're going to use when you're ready to create new discussions in your course. To the right of that discussion button, you have the settings icon, that little gear icon. And when I click on the gear icon, I get my discussion level settings. So you can decide whether or not you want to manually mark posts as read, or if you want Canvas to automatically mark posts as read as you're scrolling the page. I leave it set to manually because if I'm scrolling the page, maybe I'm looking for a particular message, I don't necessarily want it to automatically mark all of the other messages that I'm going past as read. I want to manually be able to check off whether I've read that message after I've actually read it. So I leave it set to manually mark posts as read. And then under student settings, those same settings that we can set at the course level, you can also set individually at the discussion level. So if I want to say as a default at the course level that they cannot edit and delete their own posts so that every discussion I create is set to that, if there is one particular discussion where I said, actually, I do want them to be able to edit and delete here, you can turn that on at the individual discussion level there, okay? If you've made any changes, you click Save. And then this very last icon will give you Commons. And we're not going to talk about Commons today, but Commons is a repository that has access to content that you can pull in and use in your course if you find it useful. But it just allows you to access anything you've labeled as a favorite in comment that you might want to pull into the discussions area. So that's what that button is there. Any questions about the options at the top on the index page here?
No.
Okay, So now we'll start talking about what these different groups mean. So when you're working with the different groups here, you can collapse them all by clicking on the arrow to the left of the group titles so that you don't have that long list of discussions showing up every time you come into the page. If you just want to look at the discussions, you can expand it by clicking the caret again to show the messages that are in that group. And the reasons for the different groups, you know, they are pretty useful. Discussions will show the current discussions that are in your course. You can leave them open indefinitely. So when you create a discussion, there is no end date so that students are able to contribute from the first day of the semester to the last day of the semester. And they're ordered by most recent activity. So the first discussion that will be listed is the one where the most recent activity has occurred. So wherever students are currently posting or wherever the last post was received is the discussion that is going to be listed at the top of the discussions listing. The pinned discussions are discussions that you want students to see first. So if you are creating discussions for every week in your course, and you want them to see week 1 first, and then when week 1 is over, you want to move week 2 up into that pinned list, you can very easily either click that little dot in the top right corner of a discussion and then choose the pin icon. And what it does is it moves that introduce yourself from the middle group, which was discussions, up into the top group of pinned discussions. What's nice about pinned discussions is you can control the order. It's not just based on most recent activity. So if you want the discussions to appear in a certain order, you can create that order here in the pinned discussions group at the top of the page. The closed for discussion section are the discussions that you no longer want students to continue contributing to. So we're in week 3. You don't want them still posting in week 1. We're trying to move them forward through the content. They should be in week 3 right now. You want to leave the discussion there so that they can refer to it, maybe look at the content or the discussion that's been happening in week 1, but you no longer want them contributing new posts. So you would move that particular discussion to the close for comments. And again, if I click on the settings in the top right corner for a particular discussion, I can choose close for comments from that menu and it will move. Why did it not move?
You have to hit save.
No, I'm sorry. I had to unpin it first and then it will move. So when it's in closed for comments, they still have read access to it. They're still able to open it and look at what they said and look at what their classmates contributed, but they're no longer able to reply and create any new posts in that particular discussion. Okay. Any questions about that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can you drag it with the pin that where you can drag it, right?
You can drag it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And why did the two move together? Why does introduce yourself in module 1? Why did the two move?
It's not, it looks like that's a optical illusion. Module 1 is still in the discussions group where it's always been. It just looks like, because there are no other ones between it, it just looks like.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions before we move on? Okay. So when you're looking at a discussion, each discussion lets you know at a glance whether or not it's a graded discussion, and it lets you know by the icon that is displayed. So that little piece of paper with a pencil indicates that this is a graded assignment. So this is letting you know at a glance that this particular discussion is being graded and will appear in the grade book. You get to see the title of the description. Underneath the title, you get to see when that last post was made. If you've set a due date, that is displayed over on the right-hand side. So you see at first glance what day you told students this was due. And then you're able to see the total number of posts along with the total number of unread posts. So it lets you know at a glance if you've got new messages that you've got to review. Questions about what we see here? Okay. Clicking on a discussion. We'll open the discussion. You're able to see the messages that have been responded to a particular post. The red dot that's filled in indicates that the message is unread. To manually mark it as read, you simply click in that circle to remove the color. As soon as you've done that, Canvas will mark it as read. If I want to filter to show just the unread messages, I can click the unread button, and again, it will hide temporarily the messages I've already read and only show me the new ones. And again, to mark them as read, I simply click in that circle to remove the dot. And once I've done that, Canvas will mark that as read. If I click unread again, it turns that filter off and it shows me all of the messages that are listed. To reply to any particular student, there's always going to be a reply button underneath each student's message, and I can click that to send the response that I want to send to that particular student. If I'm searching for a particular student, again, I can type that student's name and it will filter the messages to show me just the messages from that particular student. I can delete that and turn that out. There's also a subscribe button. Instructors are automatically subscribed to any discussion forums that they create themselves. And what that means is if you've turned your notifications on in Canvas to be alerted to new posts to a discussion forum, since you are automatically subscribed, you will be notified of any new comments to a discussion board. So you don't have to keep logging into Canvas to check to see if there are new posts that you need to respond to. You will be automatically subscribed and be notified of those new comments. Any questions about that?
Yeah, Quelly, is this similar to SpeedGrader? Are we looking in effect at information that we would also find on SpeedGrader, or is it a different thing?
That is a different thing. What you would see in SpeedGrader is kind of like a curated view of the discussions. So in SpeedGrader, you see a compilation of the student responses by student. So when you're in discussions like this, I'm seeing everybody. But when I'm in the SpeedGrader, I'm looking at a particular student and all of his or her individual posts to that discussion forum. Okay. And then I have the ability to assign a grade and some commentary.
So they're basically related in terms of content, is that right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, okay. So this is basically, this is a different view is the main thing.
Correct. So
okay.
this is the view of a particular discussion forum itself. Up at the top right corner of this discussion forum is the option for editing the options. There's the link if I wanted to get to the SpeedGrader to actually do grading, and I am going to show that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? So go ahead.
Just a question. Normally when we want something graded, we put it in assignments, but if you put it in discussions, it automatically goes, and it's going to be graded. It goes to the grade book.
So I'm going to show you that now. So when you're creating discussions, you have two options. You can create a discussion that is ungraded that you would use for like a course Q&A. That does not go in the gradebook automatically.
Okay.
Or you can create a discussion that you specify is graded, and as soon as I select the option to say that this is a graded discussion, it will automatically add it to your gradebook and specify that it is a graded assignment. So that's what we're going to do now. When you're go ahead.
1 second. If let's say there's 10 students in the class and only 6 contribute to a discussion and it's graded, is the gradebook automatically will say 0?
If we set a rule, the grade posting policy that says if there are no submissions by the due date, then it will automatically fill that 0 in for you. Okay. So to create discussions, we start from the main discussion index page, and again, you get there by clicking the discussions link in the course menu. And then you look for that red add discussion button at the top right of your page. When we click that button, it gives us a screen very similar to what you see when you're creating a new assignment or a new page or anything new that you can create in Canvas. And so you have a place to create a title. So maybe I'm going to create a course Q&A. So I'm going to say this is the course Q&A discussion forum. Then you have a text area where you can provide students with the instructions for what they're going to do in this particular discussion. So post your course questions here. You have the access to the rich content editor using the toolbar here at the top, as well as the options here on the right-hand side of the screen. So if you wanted to link to an outside website or pull in a picture or embed a video, whatever it is that you want to include that they need to either review or look at to complete this discussion post, you can do that here in this area at the top. As I scroll down, you have the ability to choose a particular section, and this really only applies if you are combining multiple sections of a course together. So if you teach 2 sections of the course and you've decided to cross-list, you can choose to either post this discussion to all sections, or you would have the ability to select individual sections for that particular discussion forum. If you want to choose a file and share a file with students, you also have the ability to attach that file by clicking Choose File and browsing and selecting the file of your choice from your computer. And then you have the options for the individual discussion itself. Whether or not you want the replies to be threaded or not is an option that you would select. And the difference really, the way I think of a threaded discussion or not threaded, is a threaded discussion is something where I think of a conversation where a student posts their response, and if someone else replies to them, it combines them together. It keeps them together so that you're following the thread of that conversation. If you're not threading the conversation, all of the responses are in hierarchical order. So it doesn't group them by who's responding to who. It just groups them in order of when the message was posted. So it can be kind of hard to follow a conversation when it's not threaded together or grouped together. So for the purposes of these particular discussion forums, I always like to select the threaded replies option. If you are going to be grading contributions to a discussion, a feature that is nice to turn on is the users must post before seeing replies. What this does is it does not allow them to see the responses from the rest of the class before they've composed and submitted their own responses. So it kind of keeps, we'll call cheating, to a minimum, because they can't see the other answers to borrow from those answers. It also keeps students from saying, I agree. They actually have to compose a response that has some substance. And it kind of cuts down on a lot of that if you say users must post before seeing the other replies. If you are going to grade, you want to make sure you select the graded checkbox. As soon as we select that checkbox, Canvas gives us the grading options. So if you're looking for those options and you don't see them and you're saying, where's the place where I say how many points it's worth, you want to remember to enable that grading checkbox first. Once you've specified that it's graded, we have the ability to create a group discussion, which we'll talk about in a second. You want to tell Canvas how many points it's worth or not. And if there is a due date associated, a due date. For this particular discussion, I'm not going to enable those because this is just a course Q&A. So all I want to enable here are threaded replies. Here are the options down here at the bottom where I can specify how long this discussion is available. But because I want students to be able to read and contribute to this from the first day to the last day, I'm simply going to leave the available from the available until blank. So that way they have access for the entire length of the course.
Okay.
When I'm done, I want to make sure I hit save and publish so that the discussion is created and add it to the discussion page. And because it is published, it is also going to be available to the students as well. Okay, I'm going to click that discussions link in my course menu. And you'll see that it has added the course menu to my list of discussions. And so if this is important and I always want it at the top of the page, I can pin it so that it is always at the very first thing the students have access to on the discussions page. I'm going to add the discussion again. And this time I'm just going to call it week 1. Again, instructions would go in the text box. allow threaded, users must post before seeing, and graded. Those are really the three that I recommend that you enable if you are going to grade participation in a discussion forum. So again, always allow threaded, users must post before seeing, and graded. Once we do that, I'm going to put the point value in, what assignment group it belongs to. And then again, if this is a graded assignment, it is a good idea to set a due date so that Canvas will automatically add it to their to-do list, as well as trigger notifications to students about reminders that this assignment is due and it's coming up. Again, we're going to hit save and publish. And so when we go back to the discussions index page, remember I mentioned that you can tell at a glance which discussions are graded and which ones are not. You'll notice that the week one we just created has the little icon, but the course Q&A does not. So you can really tell at a glance which ones you've set up to be graded and which ones you haven't. So if this was supposed to be graded, you could very easily edit and turn that option on. Any questions about creating those discussions?
I have a question.
Go
You
ahead.
said the group was participants. You kind of jumped, you know,
No,
Oh, okay.
participation.
participation. Okay.
So when I created this particular discussion, in this course, I have assignment groups created because I'm going to do weighted grading. And so all of my discussions are going to go in the participation group.
Well, I have a question. For participation, say you want to have a minimum number of responses by students to qualify for participation. Is there a way that Canvas can identify that a student has posted, say, twice, and then that triggers a notification that it's been completed?
Yeah, no, Canvas does not have that ability.
I've been doing it visually for whatever I do. Yeah.
They don't have a way to automatically count. It is just something you still have to do manually.
Yeah.
I always recommend including that requirement in the instructions area.
Yeah, that's what
But
I
then
do.
it's a matter,
yeah,
it's a matter of looking at the responses in the speed grader to see if they've met it.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Okay.
George, that's a frequent thing you see on the Canvas forums as well as the Canvas feature request. I know they've addressed that it's on their radar. It's just not that's been worked in.
Well,
yet,
I mean, I've used Blackboard and Angel in the past, and that's something that's, even those two platforms haven't never had that kind of option. So it's something they really should work on.
Agreed. Okay. So I'm going to go back into this particular discussion to talk a little bit about deadlines and due dates that kind of piggyback, George, on somewhat of what you were asking.
Mm-hmm.
With a lot of discussions, instructors will have a requirement that an original post has to be in by a certain date, and then students need to respond to one classmate or two classmates by a secondary date. And Canvas does not necessarily have the ability to build those multiple due dates in this particular area. So the first thing we always recommend is that you specify the due date in your text, in your instructions. So your original post is due by Tuesday night. You must reply to two classmates by Saturday night. So we always recommend that you include those instructions in the text area. Then in terms of which due date you choose here, that really is kind of a personal preference. So you can specify the original response date. So if they've got to post the original response by Tuesday, you could select the 14th here. What you could then do is go to the calendar and manually add an event to the calendar for Saturday that reminds them that discussion responses for week one are due on that particular date. Or you could do the vice versa, where you put the full due date here, so everything has to be posted here by the 18th, and then in the calendar you would put a separate entry for the 14th to remind them that original posts are due on that day. The other thing that you can do is you can create a 0-point assignment that gets added to the assignment page to remind them to post those responses to the discussion. And all of that is done to just trigger the notifications to remind them of the multiple level of participation that is required in this single discussion. Because the way it is designed currently by Canvas, there is only a single due date that you can select from the create discussion fields. So you can play with that by adding the other entries manually to the calendar or by creating a 0-point assignment for those other requirements. Any questions about that?
Quelly,
Yes.
if I set my first post due date for the 2nd and the next day happens, can I just go in and change the due date to the 7th? And is that another workaround or not?
You could.
Do the students who posted already, does it not show up as a notification for them?
If you've changed the due date, as long as there's settings, and so that's the thing, it's all very user specific. So if in their notification preferences, as long as students have chosen to be notified about due date changes, they will get a notification. So if they've already posted by the original due date, you go in and change it to the new one. As long as their notifications are on about changes to the due date, they'll get it. If they've turned this off, then they won't get that notification at all.
Okay, so it's a risky choice.
It is. Yeah, I would go the other way with that.
Got it.
I have a question about the late posts. I
Okay.
think in the past, I got posts very late, and I think it's because I didn't enable the discussion. So if you have a deadline, students, but the discussion is still available, they can still post something.
Absolutely, yeah. Canvas will not close that for them unless you've selected. So for example, I'll go back into this week 1 and click edit. Because I have left this available from and available until blank, even though I've said the due date is July 17th, a student can come in on August 2nd and post as long as the course is still open because there is no until date. If you wanted to prevent that and you really don't want to see any posts after the 17th, then you would set an until date that matches your due date, and that would effectively close the discussion to them on that date.
And they still see the discussion.
They
post.
still, they won't see the discussion.
Oh.
They'll see the link, but they can't get at it. They'll get the message that the discussion is closed. And so that's another reason why I usually don't recommend that, because we still want them to be able to see it. What you could do, instead of setting the until date, you would have to remember to come in and go to discussions and move this to the close for comments field. That way they could no longer contribute to it, but they would still be able to see the discussion itself.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Chloe, I have one. A little off topic, but I've been playing around with the conferences tool.
Okay.
And I noticed that there's something called Blue Button is the default conference. Is that going to be removed and Zoom put in there?
Unfortunately, no. The way that the Canvas or the Zoom LTI works is it's kind of a standalone. It's not added to the course as an option to select from conferences. So conferences comes with Canvas, and so we get Big Blue Button as a part of our installation. So at the moment, we're leaving everything available, and Zoom will remain as a standalone. It does not show up as an option under conferences.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm going to talk about next is group discussions, because I did mention that we would come back to that. So in general, when you create a discussion, it is available to the class as a whole. So if you're looking for whole class participation, then you create a discussion just like I did for week 1, and it is automatically available to everyone in the class. But then there are times where you want to create group discussions because you want students to work in smaller, more manageable groups. So if you've got a group of 30, it can be a lot to negotiate 30 messages and responding to 2, and it can create a lot of messages that are very overwhelming, not just for the students, but for instructors as well, to have to read and review and monitor and respond to. So there may be use cases where you want to break the entire class up into smaller groups so that they can have those weekly discussions or work on those weekly problems or small group assignments in smaller groups instead of whole classes. And so we can create group discussions for that. Anytime we're talking about groups, we want to head over to the people area, and you want to create a group set. And you can do this ahead of time, or you can do this on the fly when you're creating the discussion or creating the assignment or whatever it is that you're specifying for a group. But you want to head over to people, and you want to create a new group set. You can see that I've already done this. I've created a group set called discussions. And within that group set, I've created 2 discussion groups and assigned my students to those groups. To create a group set, you're simply clicking the Add Group Set button. You can call it whatever you want. If you want to say these are the group sets for participation in the course, you can call them participation. You could allow self-sign-up where students get to choose what group they want to be in. Or if you want control, you can either automatically split students into a certain number of groups, or you can create the groups manually. So if you know who you want to pair together, you know who you don't want to work together, you want to choose the manual option if you want to do that. Once you click Save, it creates the participation group set. And then now it's waiting for you to manually create the groups that you want within that group set. So if we're just going to say the red group, red team, and then we're going to say green team. Okay. Once you have the groups that you need, it's just a matter of dragging the students over from the unassigned list into the groups in the way you want them divided. If I click the little arrow to the left of the groups, it will expand the list so I can see who's where. And if I needed to move students around, I can always drag and drop them around till I get them where I want them to be. So anytime you're talking about creating group assignments or creating a group discussion, always start by creating your groups first in the people area. If you forget to do that, there is a way to do that on the fly when you're creating the group discussion or the group assignment itself. But I always like doing that ahead of time in the people area before I need to do that in discussions. Any questions about creating the groups?
I do.
Go ahead.
Can you change the groups from assignment to assignment? Discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so if you've created this group set called discussions, you're not stuck using that group set every time you create a group discussion. You can modify, create new groups, make changes, and use different group sets for different discussions. Okay. So I'm going to head back to discussions.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
So I just thinking, because when I use breakout rooms in Zoom, I haven't been able to have students record their conversations. And I'm just thinking, could I use this discussion group to have them post something about their conversations so that I have a record of their
If
work?
they took notes, they could post the notes in a group area and you would be able to read that. The reason you're not able to have them record is that currently in Zoom, only the host is able to record. What you could do is visit. Can we do this, John? Can the host visit a breakout room and start the recording in that breakout room for the group?
Sorry, no, because what it's going to do, you can only record breakout rooms locally onto your computer.
That's
You
what it
cannot
is. I
record
forgot
breakout
about
rooms
that.
to the cloud. What you can do, if for whatever reason there was an absolute need where you need to have those recorded, you can designate one of the participants in that breakout room to record. However, like I mentioned, it can only record to their local desktop, so you would have to figure out how to go about to get that recording. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Can I offer a suggestion that I've used?
Sure.
I've used Google Docs. So and asked the students to keep track of their conversations so that I can watch it. Well, you know, if I have 3 different groups, I can look at 3 different Google Docs and see what's going on without having to jump in and out.
Mm-hmm. That's a good suggestion. Thank you, Bonnie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're back in discussions, and I'm going to create a new discussion because I want to show you how to set up a group discussion. So I'm going to click that Add Discussion button. And so this is just going to be group discussion. Week 4. Again, same thing you would do before. Any instructions, any information you want to provide to them, you provide to them in this text area here at the top. Same options as before, allow threaded replies. Maybe there's no need for them to post first before seeing replies because you want them to work collaboratively as a group and be able to see each other's posts immediately. If you are going to grade the participation in this, you want to make sure you select graded. And then you want to make sure you select this is a group discussion. Once you select that checkbox, then this is where you would select which group set should be used for this particular discussion. So if I want it to be the discussions group I've set, I would select that from the list. If you had not already created that group set, there is a button here that would allow you to do that on the fly. So if you did forget to do that in People First, you can do that on the fly here. All of the other settings are the same. How many points is it worth? What assignment group does this belong to? So that when we're doing the weighted grading, it puts it in the right category. And again, due date. And again, that's most important for adding automatically to the calendar to trigger student notifications. And again, I'm going to hit save and publish. What you will see that's a little different at the top of your discussion once it's created is it does let you know that this is a group discussion, and it reminds you that each group is going to see its own conversation for this topic. So instead of all of the students seeing everything in one place, the students who are part of Blue Moon will have a separate link that they see, and the students who are in the Timberwolves have a separate link that they see. You as the instructor can always access both groups to monitor the conversations and respond to what's happening in both groups. But the students in the individual groups will only see this discussion link once based on the group that they're in. Any questions about that?
Yes, Quaylee.
Yes.
Does everybody in the group then get the same grade? In other
So,
words, Blue Moon all get 99 or whatever?
No, because when you're, well, let's go to the, so even though we're grading this group discussion, you'll notice, hang on, the heads are in the way here. There's no participation yet, but you'll notice, unlike when you do group assignments, it's not the group names that are listed here, it's the individual student names. So you're still grading them individually, even though it is a group discussion.
Okay. And in SpeedGrader then, can you get, do you give individual feedback?
You can.
Comments?
You can.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Really, a question we got, and I have not tried to do this in any classes, so I'm going to kick this to you. Can you use require peer review to add a second due date for comments on others' posts? You can't set a due date for peer review, though, I don't think, correct?
I feel like I've used that. That's why I asked the question. I'm not.
So we can require peer reviews.
I've used it and it, oh, but maybe it doesn't Is the peer review?
It doesn't give you the option for a due date. So peer reviews is more like when you want to, instead of letting students choose who they are going to respond to, you're assigning them. So this particular student is going to respond to this particular student, but there is no way to set a due date for those peer reviews.
Okay, but does it come up as a to-do for them though?
It does come up as a to-do for them.
That's kind of, and it's, I think it didn't just say you can allow the students to choose.
It can, you can. So if we're back in here to edit, if you specify, well, I shouldn't have said that. You can manually assign or you can automatically. The students don't get to choose.
Okay, all right. Oh, I see, but automatically it'll give them.
It'll give them just somebody randomly from the list of students, yeah.
If you do it automatically, does it ask you how many? Like,
yes. So there is a space where you could specify that they have to do 1 or 2 or 3, yeah.
All right, but it doesn't give them a separate.
No. But it will show up as like a notification. It alerts them that there's a peer review that has to be completed, but there is no due date associated.
Okay. And does that give them, is that a separate grading?
So peer reviews, it doesn't allow, it gives them a separate space where they can give comments back to each other, but you don't get a separate space to grade that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Other questions about the group? Because what I wanted to show you really quickly is the student perspective of discussions in a course. So I'm going to just do a new share. And can you see my Firefox screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm in as a student here, and I'm just going to go into this particular test course. And so students can access discussions a couple of different ways when they're in Canvas. So we were just talking about to-do lists, right? So if you've specified that a discussion is going to be graded and it's coming up and it has a due date in the near future, you'll see that it does appear on their to-do list on the right-hand side of the screen. So here's this week 1 discussion we created. Here's this group discussion we created. And the links will take them directly to that discussion, so they can access it from the to-do list on the right-hand side. As long as you have made the discussions link available in the course, that link is not hidden. They would have access to it completely by going to the discussions link. If it is a graded discussion, it will also appear on the assignments page, and it will put it in order of what's coming up next by due date. So it will be listed at the top as long as it has a due date under upcoming assignments. If you have not dated it and it is graded, it will be listed in the undated assignments section. So again, they can get to it from assignments, from discussions directly. If they are on the home page in their course, they also have access to it in the to-do list. And there is also a way they can get to it from the syllabus page. So if a student tells you they can't get to the discussion, nonsense. They have about 5 million ways that they can get to the discussions. And in the syllabus, they'll find it in the course summary at the bottom of the page. Again, the course summary puts it in order by due date. So they simply find the discussion listed in the course summary, and clicking that link takes them directly in to that particular discussion forum. If you have chosen to say post first, they are notified that replies are only visible to those who have posted at least 1 reply. So hopefully that will cut down on the questions about why can't they see anything else. As soon as they hit reply and compose their response, if I could type, again, they have the ability to attach files. They have access to the rich content editor as well. So if they wanted to share a link or upload a video or record video, they could do that very easily here in Canvas. And then they could post their reply by clicking post. Just like with the instructor, as soon as a student has posted a response to a discussion forum, they are automatically subscribed. So as long as they have notifications on for discussions, they will get notifications for new comments to the discussion that they have posted to. So they are alerted when there is new activity. And so if they are required to respond to other students, they will know when those responses have been received as long as their notifications are on. Okay. Questions about what a student can see here? Okay, so I'm going to go back in as instructor and just show you very quickly the grading that's available for discussion. So again, if you're interested in grading discussions, the first thing you want to do is make sure you create a graded discussion, and that just means that when you are in the edit options for a particular discussion that you have remembered to select that graded checkbox. Once you do that, you want to make sure you publish the discussion. After students have participated in the discussion, you can always access the speed grader for a particular discussion forum. So if we go to week 1, at the very top right, I'm going to click the button with the dots. The speed grader link is always going to be available there for graded discussions. When I click speed grader, it opens it up and it will show me all of the posts for this particular student. So if they were only required to post once, they fulfilled that requirement, I could go ahead and provide the numerical score on the right, as well as any text feedback in the assignment comments as well. To save your comments, you just want to remember to hit submit. And you've very quickly and very easily graded the student contributions from the discussion forum while in the speed grader. If you wanted to view the full discussion in this window, you simply click that link and then it gives you access to the entire discussion right within the speed grader window. To get out of speed grader, I'm just going to close that and it takes me right back to that discussion there as well. So again, for any discussion that's been set up as a graded discussion, you just want to click on the title to open, click the option in the top right corner, select speed grader, and then again, you're able to see the student along with all of their responses in the window on the left. You can select the grade, enter the numeric grade, and provide comments in the feedback area on the right. Any questions about that? Okay. One last, go
while
ahead.
you're in there, just rubrics with discussion boards.
Yeah, so rubrics are similar to, I should say, discussions are similar to assignments in that you can attach a rubric to a discussion forum. If you were familiar with creating assignments, you would be looking for the add rubric button at the bottom here of the discussion window, but that's not where it is for discussions. Canvas kind of buries it. You have to make sure you click the dots at the top right to get into the options. And then you want to look for add rubric in that list of options. Once you've selected add rubric, just like when you're working with an assignment, you can either build the rubric from scratch right here from this window, or you can click the find a rubric link. Once you do that, you simply look for the rubric you want to use, click use this rubric. I'm going to click the little pencil to edit really quickly, because I want to tell Canvas that I want to use this rubric for grading. So when I select that and say update, we're just going to say leave different. Now the rubric's been attached. So unlike the assignments, you cannot see the rubric listed at the bottom of the discussion listing. You have to kind of remind students as well as remind yourselves to click the dots in the top right corner in order to view and add rubrics. Okay. Questions about rubrics? Did that cover the question, John?
I think we should be good.
Okay.
Claudia, students can save the rubrics when
Yeah.
they enter the discussion group, correct?
So what I will do is, again, I'll switch back to the student view. So as a student, I'm going to go to discussions, and I think I added that to the introduce yourself. So if I go to that particular discussion, as a student, I won't see it at the bottom of the discussion page like I do with the assignment. I do have to click that little button in the top right corner, and then it will give me a show rubric option. And when I click that, I'm able to see the rubric that will be used to grade me, and review it the same way I would if there was an assignment. As the instructor, when you're grading, it works exactly the same way. If I go into SpeedGrader, I can choose to view the rubric when I'm working with the student responses, and I can grade simply by clicking on the rubric criteria that matches and click save, and that would assign the score to the student and show the rubric to them as well once they're looking at their final grade. Okay. Other questions about that?
Haley, several screens ago, I saw where something came up that you could enter complete or incomplete. So
Yes.
something was done or not done, but it wasn't given a numerical grade.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's useful. How do you?
So that's done when you're creating, and I'll actually create a brand new one. So I'm going to add a new discussion. Come on. Okay. And so once I've specified that this is going to be a graded discussion, I get the display grade as. Instead of points, which is normally what we select because we want to give a numeric score, what I would select instead is complete, incomplete. And so once I select that as the way I want my grade to be displayed, I'm given that drop down in the SpeedGrader. So now I can just select complete or incomplete from the drop down while I'm working with the SpeedGrader.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Because as I'm looking at my notes, it looks like that was the last topic that was on the list to be covered. So we can open it up to other questions that you might have that we either didn't cover or that are specific to your class that you want to ask. If you don't have any questions, I will say thank you for joining us again. And we'll make sure to post the recording when it's available. But if you do have questions, we do have time and we can hang and answer those for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody.